What's up, everybody? It's your boy Built for Anything, and I'm here with the very first episode of Investment 101. Okay, now I'm thinking of making this a series. I want to see how this goes. I want to see, if you guys are learning something from it. The more interactions that I get, the more I'll do. But the reason why I wanted to do this is because, just to tell you a little bit, those who don't know, the background that I come from is in finance. I was a financial advisor for over a decade, and along the way, I've learned a lot of things. And I'm very grateful for that experience. I've helped a lot of people along the way, and I want to be able to use this platform to just educate those who know very little, because I find that there's pride in people not wanting to ask questions, right? People don't really like to come across as if they don't know something, right? So in my experience, I learned over the years that when I've dealt with people, there's a couple common things that I've noticed along the way. And hopefully, in watching this video, I can share with you guys some basic information. And obviously, this is not for the, if you're just like an investment guru or, you're really advanced, this video is probably not going to be for you. It's probably going to be more of a refresher. But hopefully as we go along, I can get more advanced and talk about different topics. But I hope again that anybody who's watching this video can learn a little bit something from it. Because if you know a little bit more today than you did yesterday, then you're doing all right. Then I did my job. Okay? So enough of me talking. Let's get right to it. Okay. So this is the board, all right? Now, a couple things that I wrote here. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Well, you see it here. Here's where I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start with the why. Because in my experience, no matter who I've ever dealt with in the past, in my presentations, you have to know what's the why. You have to know what is the goal of that individual. Because everybody is different. Everybody has a different goal, different motivations. So we always start with the why. And right away I can tell you right now, it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter male, female, doesn't matter. Everybody should invest. And believe it or not, everybody invests in something. Parents, if you don't want to invest in stocks and bonds and things like that, you invest in your kids. You invest in your education. You invest in your car, you invest in your relationships. Anything that you put forth something first in anticipation of something coming your way later, that's an investment. So this is just another way of doing it when you talk about finances. So I always start with the why, right? So if you're ever in a meeting, if you ever go to a financial advisor for the first time, he or she should be spending a lot more time getting to know you and understanding what is your why. What is it that they can do for you, okay? So you always got to start there. Why am I investing? Am I trying to get rich overnight? Am I thinking long term? Am I thinking short term? All these things play a factor. Now, the next thing is, once you understand what the why is, then you can get into what is the what? Like, what do you do now, right? So now that brings me to over here on the left. You have stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Now, these are just some of the more common types of investments that are used. This is not everything. There are other types of investments. There's options. There's hedge funds. There's different ways. There's variable annuities, fixed annuities. These are all things that hopefully I can get into in later videos. But for now, I just want to talk about the basics, right? Because you got to build a strong foundation first, guys. So I want to start, slow. I'm going to start with stocks. Okay. Now, one thing I can tell you right away is that all three things are different. Okay. Stocks is ownership. So whenever you hear the word stocks, I want you to think ownership. So if you own stocks in a company, that's why you always hear on TV about certain people having a majority share in a business. That means they can make most of their decisions. I'll give you an example. Jay-Z in the Barclays Stadium. When the Barclays first came to Brooklyn, a lot of people was under the impression that Jay-Z was the person who completely funded this entire thing. And then we found out that he only had like a 0.0001 stake in the actual company, but they used him as the face of the Barclays in order to generate revenue in terms of concerts and just for popularity. So they basically used him, but he also in turn used them to further his business ventures. But at the end of the day, Prokhorov, which is the owner of the team, he was the billionaire. He was the one who had the majority shares, right? So whenever you think of stocks, think of ownership. And stocks can be used for long term, which is ideal, or stocks can be used for short term, right? But when you think of stocks, think of ownership. Now, when you think of bonds, now this is where things are a little bit different. When you think of bonds, think of debt, right? Yes, debt. Think of loaning money in return for an interest rate, right? So if you have student loans, right? That's a form of debt. A car loan, debt. Mortgage, debt, right? That's bonds. Now, the thing with bonds is that in return for you lending your money, you're getting interest as a result, right? And then over time, they would pay you back your money at a maturity date. Now, the thing with bonds is, what people get really confused, is that a lot of people tend to categorize bonds and stocks the same way, which they're not. They tend to kind of work opposite at times, because bonds they're sensitive to interest rates, right? And again, when I talk about interest rates, remember, we're talking about debt. If you're looking for a credit card, if you're looking for a loan, if you're looking for a car loan, a business loan, what are you looking for? You're looking for the lowest interest rate. Now, when you understand the money system, what do banks do? When banks lend money, their goal is to try to charge a rate above what it is that they make. That's the only way they make money. If I can borrow your money and only make 2%, I can't return you 3%. You get what I'm saying? So when you think of bonds, think of debt. And the interesting thing is that when it comes to companies, and this is their way of raising money, bonds is what they issue to shareholders or people who want to, investors, me and you. And in return, if anything happens to that company, bonds have first lien position over stocks, which just means they have to pay their debt holders first before they pay their shareholders when it comes to the stocks. So when you think of that, there's some form of safety. It's a bit more secure with bonds than it is with stocks, although they both have their risks, okay? Now, mutual funds. Mutual funds are packaged products, okay? I've had a lot of people confuse mutual funds with stocks. Like they literally call them, oh, this is a stock. That's not the case. Here's why. Mutual funds are investment companies, which means you don't own the stocks. You don't own the bonds directly. You own shares of a company that goes out and purchases the stocks and bonds. So basically what you're doing is, instead of you going out and saying, I'm going to purchase this one stock of Yahoo or YouTube or whoever, Google, what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to go and I'm going to buy it wholesale. I'm going to go to a company that goes out, and not only do they buy stocks and bonds, but they also manage it. So what you're paying for when it comes to mutual funds is that you're paying for management. And that management has a cost, right? So when you look at the internal costs of mutual funds over time, it can be costly, it can be very, very expensive. Because cost plays a factor, people. Regardless of what you invest in, you have to consider the money that you're paying into it versus what you're getting in return. Okay? So these three things are the most popular forms of investment that most people do. Okay? Now, I'm gonna go over here. Who should invest, right? Everybody. Like I mentioned before, it doesn't matter who you are. Everybody should invest. Because in my experience, I find that there are people who are 60 years old, 70 years old, or people who think that they're at a point where they shouldn't be investing anymore because they're no longer working or they're retired or something like that. And those are the people that, believe it or not, need it the most. Okay? Because what happens is that when you think of the money system, you think of money, the way it works. Money is really value, right? $20, if I told you $20 can only buy you a bag of chips, you wouldn't look at $20 the same way anymore, right? Money is about the value. And the reason why people invest is because that dollar is going to be worth more in the future than it does right now, because there's this thing called inflation, right? Now, which these are all things that I'll definitely discuss further down the line. Risk is something that we all need to control, but we shouldn't try to avoid. Okay? Now, people always ask me whenever it came to investments, they want to talk about risk. And I usually lead the conversation with risk because I've learned over the years that that's the biggest reason why people don't really invest in the first place. People like to feel safe, right? And what you got to understand is that even safety has a price to it, okay? And risk has a price to it too, even with avoiding risk. Because what happens is sometimes it's what you don't do that could put you further from if you had done it. Which means when you look at risk and you look at the fact that yes, there's an opportunity, there's cases where you could lose money, but there's cases where you can make money as well. It's just like the lotto, right? And I hate to use the lotto because we all know it's 1 in a million. But you know what's worse than playing the lotto and not winning? Is not playing the lotto, because then you'll never win at all. The chances of the person who actually buys a ticket is better than the person who buys no ticket. And so when that person wins, right, they had a better chance. They took a risk, but their risk for them going into that paid off. And so what I'm saying is that whenever you look at investments, you got to think down the line. And I find that people who look at risk is because they're thinking of right now. So you don't use your money that you need right now for investing in something that's going to reap benefits down the line. So it's just common sense, right? But the problem is that people tend to expect too much too soon. And that's the biggest problem. This is a long-term game. When you think of some of the biggest investors in the world, they put a lot of time into it. They had to wait for that business to grow, and they're still investing to this day. So you gotta look at it as a long-term thing. This is a marathon, this is not a sprint. It's not who could get rich quick, fast. It's who can stay the course of time, and over time is how they make wealth, okay? So last thing I'm gonna talk about is diversification. Now diversification, I remember this quote from Warren Buffett. He said, diversification is protection against ignorance. It makes little to no sense to those who know what they're doing. What is he saying there, right? Diversification in the simplest form is a way to minimize risk, okay? And diversification just simply means that you're not putting all your effort or all your expectations into one thing. You're spreading it out. So when you hear people talk about you should have passive income and multiple, sources of income, what they're saying is that if you have a job, you could lose your job, get hurt in your job, and if you don't have other ways of making money, then you're pretty much screwed, right? So when you think of diversification in investing, it's kind of like the same thing. You want to make sure that you don't just put all your eggs into one company, right? You don't want to just invest in one company. You want to invest in other companies as well. You want to create a portfolio that is balanced, right? That is meant to mitigate risk. So sometimes if you have an investment that is risky, if you have an investment that is not risky, you, as diversification, you put a little bit of money in something that is, so that way it can help buffer. One can help buffer the other, right? So it's good to have like opposites, right? So diversification is something that, I always preached about, and I'm kind of doing that now. I'm getting into different forms of business, and my approach is that I want to be able to create not just multiple sources of income, but just be able to capitalize and be flexible, right? You have to be able to be flexible in life, right? So that's it for right now, guys. If you like this video, please leave your comments down below, hit that like button, share with anybody who is, just starting out or thinking about investing that needs some tips. Like I said, based on the reaction, I plan on doing plenty more of these as we go along and make it somewhat of a series. But I hope that this helps people out there. Again, gotta invest in something, guys. All right, if you invest in nothing, you get nothing in the long run. It's your boy Built for Anything. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.